Have you ever wondered if you're truly ready for that next big product management role? You're certainly not alone. Every day, talented PMs grapple with questions about their career growth, from individual contributor to director, vice president, and beyond. Today, you'll get an insider's view of the product management career ladder from someone who's climbed it, Kimberly Bloomston, Chief Product Officer for LiveRamp. She has led product teams across multiple industries and will share the real, unvarnished truth about each role's responsibilities and challenges as she did move from IC into management roles. Listen to this episode so that you can hear the career-defining insights that can accelerate your journey from product manager to product leader. And also, if you're listening and you want to watch the video version of the discussion, you can go to our new YouTube channel. Simply search for Product Mastery Now on YouTube. Let's jump in and help you plan your career development.
How can you unlock your full potential as a product manager? We're sharing the product management insights you need. They are based on the 7 research-backed knowledge areas for product mastery. You'll learn to create products customers love, enhance your influence, and elevate your career. Welcome to Product Mastery Now, hosted by Dr. Chad McAllister, product management professor, practitioner, and your guide.
Kim, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here, Chad. Thanks for inviting me.
You have a fascinating background. Obviously, there's 2 career paths. When I was out of school in an engineering company and really enjoyed doing engineering work, we had our technical career path to pursue and then kind of the leap from technical into management. Today, we'll be talking about kind of that business role. But you did have, you were an individual contributor, product manager at one point. But before we get into kind of that journey that you took, I want to hear the original start, right? You went from college into product work somehow. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So in college, I was a philosophy and computer science major. I grew up in a very tech-friendly house. We had computers from a very young age. I think we had computers before even the school did in our house. And my dad was an entrepreneur. He owned some retail destinations. So I was working initially when I was in college at a company that did consulting in the retail industry. And it was just super familiar to me. But I was a philosophy major and I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I mean, at some point, maybe I wanted to be an attorney or who knows. And I had to finally pick a major. Is it going to be philosophy or is it going to be computer science? And I landed in philosophy. And I worked at this company for about 10 years. I rose up through the ranks from a part-time employee when I was in college to everyone in the company reported up through me. And it was a smaller company that was consulting focused for the retail industry. And we also had a software platform that we used within our call center. And that software platform would enable us to send letters, make calls, receive calls. But a lot of the build that we had to do was to follow certain state regulations to ensure that we were really customer focused in everything we would do. And as VP of operations, my job was to work with our third party kind of engineer consultants to figure out what work we wanted to do within that platform to improve our ROI, to improve our customer outcomes. And so I was constantly looking for ways to improve things. At one point, I think I found an opportunity to save about $100 a week from automating some code. And it was just fun to look at kind of the dollars and cents saved over time. And I was talking to my brother, who's an engineer, and he's like, and I was excited about this thing that saved a fraction of a penny per piece of mail that we sent out. We sent millions of letters a day. And he's like, that's a job. It's called product management. And I was like, wait, what? And I refocused my career from kind of working in general business operations to going deep into a technology company, and just fell in love with this idea of figuring out ways to make the lives of people better, whether it's users, whether it's people on the receiving end of products, and just this fundamental idea in product that everything can be improved was really exciting to me, and that you could use technology to solve real business problems. And so that was the start of my kind of journey into product, which is rare because I was rising through the ranks in an executive role in general business operations, and pivoted directly to just PM and moved into an IC role in PM.
So you followed something that sounded really interesting to you, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
Different experience, right? Going for the business route first and managing people and creating strategy. So you kind of had some of the hard things under your belt in terms, I say hard, in terms of the softer skills. Because I think a lot of the ICs that move into the more management roles now are responsible for others. This is an area where we can struggle. Did you have, as you just made that journey, going from philosophy into business, did you find some hurdles there that you had to deal with?
Totally. Yeah, I remember I was a part-time employee in college, and this was the time when like receipts would print out, you would sign a credit card receipt, right? And retailers, if you didn't sign the credit card receipt, consumers could fight back the charge and deal with all of that. And so we would literally audit these receipts on behalf of these big retailers to make sure that the signatures were present, and then we would process their chargebacks. And I was an IC working for a manager at this company at the time, and I became her manager within like 2 years of working there, and she reported to me. And I remember one of the largest challenges I had was the very first, I don't see how you could possibly manage me. You do not have the experience that I have. And by the way, like, weren't you just a philosophy major? Didn't you just graduate from college? She was much older than me. She was much more experienced than me. And I had to look her straight in the face and say, I still think that there's things that I can teach you. And this is a partnership and we're going to work together. And I'm trembling as I'm having this conversation with her, but no one prepares you for that.
Right.
That was like one really big like moment for me. And the second biggest moment for me, and I was young, like this is right out of college essentially, was I was now running this whole organization. There was about 60 some odd people reporting up through me. We had a sister company with several hundred people that actually wrote point of sale software, back of house hardware, CRM capabilities. And I was pregnant and overworked and tired. And it was like 8 o'clock at night and I needed to use the restroom. And I got up from my dark office and I walked across the halls and I'm walking through people in cubicles and I'm just like heads down looking at my phone, like contacting my husband at the time to say like, hey, I'm not sure when I'm going to be home. Go to the bathroom, come back, sit down at my desk, get back to work. And this like young kid that was in the call center walks into my office and says to me, hey, Kim, can I talk to you for a second? And she's trembling like I was trembling early in that conversation. And she says to me, it would be helpful when you walk through if you just acknowledged us sometimes when you walk by us. And I was just like blown away that I didn't acknowledge the like real humans around me. So like this is pretty early in my career. And yeah, I rose up through the ranks, but boy, did I have so much to learn, even leaving that company. But I got my handle on the things that become really important to a PM. So how does support work? How does services work? How does selling work? How does making sure like that the customers are successful work? Those things reported up through me as I owned general operations for the company. So I understood the fundamentals of that, the KPIs that those business teams need to look at. And I would say above the managerial skills that I had, that was the thing that I was able to take into that like PM role that made me, I think, shine in different ways.
Yeah. Understanding how those functions work, what they expect, what's important to them. Because as PMs, we're cross-functional teams always and working with those functions.
Exactly.
So, okay, well, let's go on the journey a little bit so you did have the business experience, certainly a plus to help with some things. Most of us get that along the way as we're working with the functions and finding out what is important to them, what they do. But you got yourself into this IC product manager role as you wanted to pursue being closer to actually developing more efficient tools, processes, and the like. So what was it like being the IC product manager? What kinds of things were you doing?
Yeah, so it was a unique experience. If I zoom out and think about like ICPMs, when you're starting, I started as a senior product manager. So when you're starting as a PM at an associate level, you might not have any experience. But when you're starting at that level, you either have like industry knowledge, technology knowledge, some experience that they're like latching onto to get you into that role. And what I had was an industry knowledge that they were trying to break into. So it was a facial recognition company that built their own hardware, but also had software and embedded software. And they primarily supported government agencies around the world. So think of that as like really program project heavy.
Yep.
And they knew to get their next round of funding, to survive, that they needed this growth propellant outside of programs and projects into really having this like commercial grade product. And the CEO at the time saw the opportunity in retail. So that's how they like found me, was that I had this retail experience going a long way back, and I understood the industry, sort of born into that world, as I said early on. And so my job was to look at and understand the products and capabilities that they had, figure out what needs, like who would be a buyer persona, just like the market requirements that would support essentially the retail industry. And then what are the product capabilities that they already had that may need enhancements or may need like improvements to meet the pains that those customers had. So like job number one is like, what is the opportunity? And so the questions, it was like almost from ideation all the way to like a one-o product. But the questions that like I had to really grapple with were big. And the hardest thing for me was, and I think this is true for most ICs and sort of B2B businesses, is understanding the acronyms of the company, understanding the actual products that they already have within their four walls, because a lot of these things we're going to have to like merge together, and creating the bridge so that I could ask the dumb questions. And so, yeah, I mean, it was one of the most exciting times in my career because it was hardware, software, because everyone in the building was like a PhD, because I had no idea what I was doing and I was like learning on the fly. But it was also just one of the most rewarding experiences I had, because I thought I liked product and then I fell in love with product.
You found the right place.
Yeah.
The move from philosophy to business, now to product work.
Yeah.
As you were, so a few things you had to get your hands around, right? Just understanding the company itself, the business, the language that is used internally, right? And all the acronyms, and getting your hands around the existing products. I think this is a challenge many people run into when they join an organization. Like, okay, what do we have? What's the distinctions between them? It looks like there's some overlap. I'm trying to figure this out. What did you do to go about that? And I know this is some time ago, right? But
yeah. It feels a little bit like yesterday because it was so hard. Because again, they hadn't really commercialized things. Like it was a very program project run. So I just listened a lot. And that's, I think, where I learned the ability to listen really closely and absorb any and all things, even if I didn't understand it. So I just went on a listening tour with people across the company. I sat in as many Scrum meetings as I could to hear them as they were managing things. And one of the areas that I think I learned the most in is QA. Like I sat with the QA team and I understood what they were testing and why they were testing it and where issues were popping up. I read a lot of documentation and materials, but like it was just like heavy dosage of information coming at me from a lot of different ways. And one of my superpowers that I eventually learned is that I was able to hear the information and like remember it, but not understand it, and then like build up a memory or a use of these things over time.
Yeah, and associate it with the new things you were hearing
like,
too, right?
It
Connecting the
suddenly
dots.
would make sense, and I would be like, "Oh, this thing that person said last week, now I get it." And being able to acknowledge that to the person that I was talking to as well, because like I think it's really important as an IC. I learned was acknowledging what I didn't know when having a conversation about a potential opportunity, because like they weren't just going to let me sit still while I learned. That's the hard part of an IC job, is like they expect you to have some productivity as well. And so I had to start doing things, but I had to like be really honest about what I didn't yet know. And I do think some of my business experience before that enabled me to be a little more vulnerable and not be worried about whether or not they would just think I was a dummy and like I needed to like be gone really quickly. But also what was important is I was vulnerable about what I didn't know. And then when I did know something and something clicked for me, saying it aloud for them to see, okay, there's progress happening for my engineering counterparts, especially. That was super key.
Right. And not knowing things is actually really valuable, right? Because
Yeah.
you're coming in with, in that case, with some industry experience that the organization needs. But we need people that look at the problem differently and don't make
Yeah.
the same assumptions that have always been made. And
Agree.
I encourage ICs that are new to those sort of roles or new to the company to have confidence in asking the dumb questions because you're adding value by asking the dumb questions.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think it is a like indication that the person is going to be success, like an early success indicator, or are they asking dumb questions? Because like that means that they're being insecure about like the language, the things that they don't yet know in the job. I've had this opportunity to work across multiple industries, and man, have I been like the least aware person in a net new industry before, and that's hard. And it's also hard to learn the technology. And yeah, as you evolve in your career, you learn pieces and nuggets of things that you can take with you to the next role, but there's always going to be a 0 to 1 phase
Right.
for something within that company. And you just have to like really listen and really, really, really ask a lot of questions and be okay with it.
Yeah,
Be okay with
absolutely.
people. Some people are going to roll their eyes. They are like, it's going to happen. But other people are going to say, oh, wow, this is a weird thing that they're asking. Are we not being clear? Are we not like bringing this down to ground zero? Are we using too much inside out thinking? And I think that diverse level of thinking becomes super clear when you bring new people in who ask those questions.
Yep, really good. There's a tool I like to tell my university students about and the people I train in product as well, which is either the business model canvas, one-page literal canvas, right, 9 blocks, that if we know we have it's easy to look at, and if we know we have an alignment, we're in a good path. Or for more product work, I actually lean towards the lean canvas that Ashmore adapted from that. And I share that I like those tools because they tend to be really good collaboration tools. They're good for you to come in and learn about the product and who's doing what and what the vision is. But you get to talk to people and they get to fill in the blanks a little bit with you. And you find out pretty quickly that not everyone is even on the same page. Like they may have some different perspectives here of what the value proposition is and who we're actually serving. But it's a great way to start collaborating and kind of get up to speed on what's in place.
I agree with you entirely. I learned those tools much later. What was also difficult about this role is they didn't have like sort of a framework that they expected people to work within. So like a template like that for me to like sit down with the right people, like I would have had to find on the internet. Like it wasn't like there was like a lot of product kind of presence that were coaching and leading in that way. And I did find some stuff on the web and I used those to create frameworks, but they were long form documents and it like, gosh, that's a lot of work. And it's so much easier to use this like one sheeter to sit down and like partner with people. And I think if I knew then that tool set now, I probably would have like been more productive quicker.
I thought we should bring it into the discussion just for people to go, oh yeah, that's something I could use. Okay, so let's move on from the IC into a director role. So what was that director role like? What were you responsible for?
Yeah, so I don't know if I want to stay at that company or move to the next, but I'm going to probably hit both. What was interesting is at that company, I was really successful in bringing a product to market to support the retail industry. And I did a lot of research and training and learned product best practices on my own. And I became head of product within that company. And I was the director of product there. But I also stepped out after that and moved to higher education where they hired me as a director because I was running product at the other place. And it was in a brand new organization. I had a couple product owners that reported up through me. And my job there was very different than when I was an IC. Instead of really focused on like kind of what are the product capabilities individually that we need, I was now really planning roadmaps. I was having a ton more customer interactions than ever before, managing some of the escalations that were happening on the team, thinking about revenue in a much different way, and marketing and sales engagements. But earlier in the conversation, we talked about kind of the post-sales and pre-sales types of teams that you need to interact with. And I would say the biggest piece of change was that my alignment with stakeholders over the full mix and not just an individual squad or individual team became incredibly important, because it took the efforts of each of those engineering teams, each of those like value or platform teams, to bring together the solution for the company, for the customer, and really being able to ideate and partner with the pre and post sales teams became central to whether or not this solution could be successful in market. And so I think that was like one of the largest changes, was the depth of alignment I needed to have with those teams.
And what level in the organization was that alignment occurring? Were you involved with like the sales VP and CFO or below, right?
Yeah, below. So I led our like one product set for the company. It was a CRM suite. And there was a sales team that were specialty sellers for that product set. So the head of that team I worked with, but more frequently I would work with the individual sales enablement and people on that team, or individual sellers, and less at that leadership level, because like it wasn't my peer. That person was a VP and I was not. But on the opposite side, on the post-sale side, on the support and services side and the CSM side, there was VP relationships that had to be there. And I had to forge those relationships, and they became strong partners for me. And yeah, so it was a varying set of levels of people that you had to work with at that director. And that's, I think, a unique change for the role. Whereas when you're an IC, yeah, you have people above you in areas that you're working with, but you're working primarily with ICs day in and day out. And this was working with people managers and levels that were well above mine and sometimes below mine. And it didn't matter, because the goals were the same for the solution. And that was like a strange kind of hodgepodge of people.
I think, well, I'm sure this varies greatly by organization, right? But certainly the involvement with stakeholders across the organization to enable you to be successful, the product plans and getting something out to customers that they're going to pay the organization for, that stakeholder management is really important.
Yeah, the leadership team above me built what we called product success teams. And these teams would include these like cross-functional leaders, and then the PM director, or it could be VP, but the person who's kind of over that group of products or that set of products would partner with that team and help lead that. And the goal there was the success of this like product solution in market, and everyone had a seat at the table. It wasn't just like, what's the backlog and the roadmap, but it was, how does this get into the hands of the customer? What's the time to value? What are the challenges and roadblocks they have? What is the opportunity size? What does the competitive mix look like? What does the pricing and legal and contracting look like? It was the beginning of like really having to not just understand those things, but interact with those things. Because otherwise, whatever you plan in the product, if it doesn't have alignment to those things, the customer doesn't end up successful in the end.
And you said you had a lot more customer interactions at this stage. What did that look like?
Yeah. When I started, we had just kind of released a version of our software that broke a bunch of things for customers. So we had like a massive outage and lots of red events, as we call them, at my current company. And I immediately had customer escalations like really early into my role there. And yeah, so like lots of escalation management with customers where they would tell us the things that weren't working. The other thing that I did besides that was I would host the customer development partner group or the customer advisory board or speak at industry events. So it wasn't just the escalations. It was also like, hey, how am I getting insights in from these customers? And then how am I sharing insights out with those customers? And so that was great. And then there were some sales calls that I was brought into, but not as frequently as that became as my levels increased later on.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So certainly dealing with the escalation when product went out and there were issues, helping with that. Customer advisory boards, great way to have relationships with customers and be able to get feedback on what we're thinking about doing. And then the sales calls, if you're getting brought in, which is I think I'm going to describe what I think is the right way to do this. You can share your perspective for sure, because a product person on a sales call, it doesn't make sense because it's still a sales call. If the product person is being brought in to say, hey, we want to understand your problems more, what you're dealing with, and help you prepare for the future, that makes more sense.
Yeah. Sometimes it would be that they're buying into a vision as well. And
Yep.
so we would kind of have to start with our standard, hey, don't buy anything based off of anything I share with you today, because
Right.
this is just a vision and a roadmap. So sometimes it would be for the purpose of like, where do we go next? But when you think about like moving from the past of perpetual licenses to subscription, customers are paying for ongoing improvements to the thing over time. They need to know that there's a there.
Right.
And so when I was brought in to show that like they weren't just investing in what they got demoed then. They were investing in the ability for this thing to grow with their needs. And that if I was brought in, to your point, it signals, oh, product's going to engage with me and I can help shape that thing.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. More of a partnership. Good.
Yep.
Okay. So on from director into vice president.
Yeah. Ooh, scary. So VP, I think, was the biggest shift for me. And it's interesting because I had been a VP before. I had that unique journey as being a VP before. But the doing, the art of doing product, that's when it had the biggest shift, where I didn't spend almost any time in backlogs anymore. I mean, it was a rare occasion. I love it. So I tried to find my hands into something. And that became an enemy later on in my career. But, it shifted from having ICs that reported to me to basically having managers and managers report to me. And my shift went from really thinking about kind of that individual product to what is the practice of product, coaching the teams, what is the bigger vision, and being able to storytell in a way that not just inspired the customer, because that's incredibly important at a director level, but inspired the organization as well. And learning that knack of storytelling that like can resonate with multiple audiences within the company is important, because like if you're a software company, you are trying to share like why it's exciting that they're out selling this thing, supporting this thing. Why is it meaningful to them? Why should they buy into it? What is the future going to be like for them? And so I think that like big picture storytelling was a massive shift for me. And then engagement at executive level started more frequently at that position than before, unless there was like a big outage. And so that was two things. And then the third would be like, I started to own a budget, and it was a small budget, but it was a budget nonetheless, and learning that process within product. So lots of changes there.
Were you responsible for a P&L for product line at this point, or not yet?
No, the budget would be like my headcount, the travel budget for the team, some of the software and training for the team, but no, did not own the P&L. And I think that's like an interesting challenge that a lot of product people end up having, is ever really truly owning the P&L. I had accountability to it. So by the time I'm VP, your incentive structure is based off of business outcomes a lot more than some of the incentive structures down below. And so when you think about like your just monetary incentive structure, whatever, every company is different, but my bonus structure was based off of profitability, essentially, of the products and growth within the products, which changes the way that you need to operate on things. I mean, it's important for the incentive structure to align to the job that you have to get done.
Sure.
And that became really clear. So while I didn't own the P&L, I was accountable to our churn. I was accountable to our revenue. I was accountable to our upsells. I was accountable to our NPS. I was accountable to all of these things in a way that showed up in my compensation. So we didn't have the structure or the financial systems in place for me to truly like own a P&L, but invariably I did.
Okay, very good. And then we move on to the Chief Product Officer,
We do.
which happens to be your current title.
It is. It is. Yeah. So, like, I would say everything I said about the VP is true, with a few added challenges that come with that. So, I'm on the LT, of course, I'm on the executive leadership team. So, having really strong executive relationships is really key, and showing up as a team to the organization. So, my job is no longer in charge of product. My job is I am a steward of the business now. I am in charge of, yes, an organization, and yes, I have a unique skill set for that organization, but my role is to be a business owner in the executive team as my first team, if you're familiar with those sort of principles. And that was number one big change. Number two, interaction with the board is very consistent in this role, reporting to the board, sharing updates to the board, having random meetings with the board. And then we're publicly traded, so some shareholder interaction happens as well. And so lots of different relationships, and the role itself is deeply accountable to the business above just like the product org, and not just a single product area, but the wholeness of the business, and coaching VP, which is a lot of fun.
We could talk in a lot more detail about these things. I'll try not to make this too long. The wholeness of the business. Are you, a lot of people, I think most unfortunately, have a rather siloed perspective of organizations because they see what their function does. For whatever reason, my experiences and my wiring, my DNA, I always have thought of things as the entire system, which sometimes it gets me in trouble because I play outside lanes people want me to play in.
I'm like you, Chad.
But in your CPO position, you're clearly looking at this as a system. And because you have good relationships with other executives, if you see, I suspect, an issue with sales that we could improve, issue with financing, with anywhere, you're more involved in this, right, as that owner team for the organization.
Yeah, have to call it out. I don't know that, again, we each have our own area and discipline and function that we know better than anyone else. But that doesn't mean that your peers at the table can't call out when things don't seem to be working, or when they've seen something elsewhere that's possible to explore. And so, yeah, it is my duty to the business, to my team, to the organization, to our shareholders, to our customers, to call out when I see a challenge in any area of the business, and for them to do the same to me. And again, that doesn't mean that I'm like telling them how to do their job or them telling me how to do their job. This is what it means to really effectively lead a team and lead an organization and truly be aligned as executives. And it's been a journey, obviously. Like I didn't step into this role in day one. I had that. I had the ability to do that. You build that up over time, and your confidence changes over time, and how you embrace those things over time changes. But that was a huge learning curve.
Yeah, very good. Briefly, for sake of time, the one thing I haven't asked you about was just organizational structure. And you can't answer this and make everyone happy, but if you were going to, based on your experiences, your work, if you're going to design where product lives in the organization, where do you think that should be?
Oh, I think product should report to the CEO for sure.
Okay.
I do think that's powerful. I do see some companies where like product and engineering together is more powerful, and I think it's business dependent. So either it's CPO or CPTO, but report through the CEO for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank you so much for taking us on the journey of your experience. I think listeners got some good value in hearing about the responsibilities at those levels, people that want to move into more of a business leadership in the organization. Certainly there's multiple things that people need to know to be excelling in product work. With my university hat on, I try to help my students with that. I also have a system I use called a Rapid Product Mastery Experience for individual product managers, and also have the great pleasure of helping companies with this at times as well, just wrapped up in engagement with a fascinating company. They did such a good job together applying the concepts and helping. It was delightful to see how they improved doing their work together. This rapid product mastery experience, we go through 7 knowledge areas. These are research-backed knowledge areas. Not my research. It's 50 years of research here done by the Product Development and Management Association, and I created a system around those knowledge areas. And you really learn the foundations of what you need to be a good product person, a product manager, and moving into product leadership roles. If you're doing this as a group, we bring in collaboration and trust building along the way also. And just it's amazing to see the changes. If this sounds like something that might help you individually, or if you have a group that you want to engage with, simply go to productmasterynow.com/RPM. No doubt, Kim, you've been through lots of training experiences. You said, do the searches on your own in the beginning to find things. Yeah. But we all need some help. And I appreciate
always powerful to get some added help from the outside, for sure.
That's a good thing. And I appreciate you helping listeners today by sharing your experience. We do enjoy innovation quotes. What did you bring us for a quote, and what does it mean for you?
All right. So I've listened to several episodes, and I love all the quotes that people bring. I didn't want to repeat, and I hope I didn't. So many leaders fail to realize that without vulnerability, there's no creativity or innovation. Why? Because there's nothing more uncertain in the creative process, and there's absolutely no innovation without failure. And so there's 2 things in that, and that's by Brene Brown, whom I love, but there's 2 things in it, maybe 3 things in that really get to the heart of me. And one of them is failure is necessary to innovate. And I think sometimes we think of failure as a blemish. I celebrate failures. I think celebrating failures is incredibly important. If you have them individually, if you have them as a team, thinking about them, learning from them, super key. You fall down a bunch of times before you make it through. Mm-hmm. That the process is creative, I think is an important thing to remember. It's not just a numbers game, though you do need numbers, but there's creativity, which means you got to bring a lot of divergent thinking into it. And then finally, I don't hire people in my organization unless they can be vulnerable. I think vulnerability is deeply important to learning, to being creative, to listening, and to innovating. You got to listen like you don't know everything. You got to listen with curiosity. And so those 3 elements in one kind of encapsulation is super inspiring to me.
I love the quote. Thank you for sharing it with us. I think of failure in terms of learning. I just reframe it in my head. It's of course, we're doing something new. We're not going to get it right the first time. No one ever does, right? And we're learning. So
totally.
Great. Thanks for sharing the quote. Good one from Brene Brown. And for people that want to find out more about you, the work you're doing, the work that your company's doing, where should we go?
Yeah. So as you said earlier, I'm the Chief Product Officer at LiveRamp. You can check us out at liveramp.com. We just launched a new version of our platform. So when I think about the exciting work that my team has had the opportunity to do, it's really building this data collaboration platform that enables customers to collaborate on data, which is the currency of businesses today, to create these excellent consumer experiences. And so we just launched a new version of that. Check it out. Look at the video. There's a demo of it that you can walk through. I love that. I love to celebrate what my team is doing. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love learning from others. That's an important part of this job. And we need to create a community of product people, which is why I love what you're doing, Chad.
I appreciate you being a listener and now being a guest on the podcast too. Yeah. I'll put those links in the show notes certainly to make it easy for people to find the resources. But who would be an ideal customer that you'd be looking for at LiveRamp?
Oh, such a great question. We support kind of an ecosystem of customers, but we primarily work with brands that want to reach consumers, right? They want to reach people. And so we really are a B2B company. So you can think of those as some of the biggest retailers in the world, but you can think of those as niche brands that are looking to grow their presence and grow their business opportunity. We primarily focus on the interactions that you have with consumers along their journey. We, as consumers, buy stuff and interact with content across the web, across our email or inboxes or our mailboxes at home or the phone. And there's all these other ways that we interact with with brands today. And LiveRamp helps bring that together in a connected way to really ensure that each of us as consumers has a good relationship with that brand. And we're being brought things that we'd be interested in buying, and not just a bunch of spam and trash. And so
Right.
lots of different types of customers, as you can imagine. We need tech platforms like Meta, and we need publishers, for instance, like NBCU in the connected TV space, and Amazon, and all these amazing platforms. But lots of really powerful, innovative brands are the key
Fantastic.
of our business.
Very good. Yeah, brands looking to find better ways to connect with customers. So
Absolutely.
great.
That's it in a nutshell.
Kim, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your journey with us.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
And listeners, if you want to find a written article of everything we discussed, that's an easy way for you to share this with your colleagues. If there was something that you'd like to pass on, simply go to productmasterynow.com/521. And also that new YouTube channel needs some love. If you want to check it out and subscribe, that would be very helpful. Everyone, as always, keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.